Dave Apsley. I'm a forester and a natural resources specialist with Ohio State University Extension. Today I'm joining you from the village of Colton, Ohio, which is the birthplace of Governor James A. Rhodes. Many of you may not be familiar with this little village, but it is located in Jackson County between Jackson and Wellston. I'm in an old cemetery that's up on the ridge, and cemeteries are almost like arboretums sometimes. They're a great place to learn your trees because you oftentimes have foliage down close to the ground, and a lot of times you've got a lot of variety. One thing I've noticed over the years, a lot of cemeteries have a lot of conifers, and I'm using air quotes, cedars. There are lots of these species around because they have green foliage and they show some signs of life even in the winter months. This is one species. It's actually called northern white cedar, or another common name is arborvitae. Arbor translates to tree and vitae means life. So it's a tree of life. It actually had some medicinal characteristics and provided vitamin C and played a big role in helping folks with their nutrition and prevented scurvy is one of the things they said that this plant was used for. But it is native to Ohio. It's not very widespread. It's more probably northern and scattered throughout the state. Where I first learned it, I was in forestry camp up in northern Wisconsin, and you would have these huge low-lying areas called cedar swamps, and they were dominated by northern white cedar or arborvitae, and the deer used those areas for thermal cover in extreme cold winter periods. They would actually yard in these cedar swamps, and that's where they overwintered to get out of that extreme cold. But in Ohio, you typically find them in small patches in wetland or swampy areas, and typically in areas that have more of a calcareous or limestone substrate, the rock base under there. So again, it's northern white cedar, scattered mostly in the western part of the state and planted fairly widely in old cemeteries and in the landscape. One thing you'll also notice, you'll rarely find foliage much lower than this on an arborvitae, and that's because it's deer candy. It's actually one of the favorite food sources or browse sources of deer when they have that option. And you'll find these trees oftentimes in a landscape where they look like mushrooms because the deer browse them so tightly as high as they can reach, and then they spread out like a mushroom as you get higher up. So how do we identify arborvitae? Well, arborvitae looks like a lot of those trees that we call cedars, but it's actually not a true cedar. It's called a white, and it's got a hyphen in the common name, which means it's not a true cedar. But what it does have is scale-like foliage, flattened, kind of like eastern red cedar, but they're a little bit broader. Ridges, or the branches or branchlets are broader. They tend to be flattened, and you have 4 rows of these scales that run down the length of the foliage. And the foliage is relatively flattened, so if you lay it on your hand, it lays nice and flat on your hand. A little darker green and more lustrous, kind of shiny on the upper sides. If you flip them over, they have more of a lime green color to them. And again, that's arborvitae's foliage. As far as cones, they're nothing like eastern red cedar. Remember, eastern red cedar has the bluish berry with the white coating on it, and that's what they make gin out of. The Atlantic white cedar, which you're going to find closer to the Atlantic Ocean, has little soccer ball looking cones, but these cones have 8 to 10 scales. They can be up to about a ½ inch in length. They tend to be clustered up on the tips of the branches, and they're more upright on the twig. So again, small cones, 8 to 10 scales. They're rounded, there's no spines or prickles, and they tend to be more upright. Another characteristic is the stringy shredded bark. It's either tan or very light colored, and as it gets older, it may begin to peel off. And then finally, just the form of this tree. A lot of times it's pretty columnar. It'll be nice and columnar in shape. Sometimes it gets a little broader, but it is commonly planted in our landscapes. You'll often find them in old cemeteries. And again, it's northern white cedar. Thanks, everybody. Please take at least part of your day to enjoy this nice spring day in the woods.